Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. And this time around we were playing as the Vampire Counts against the Dark Elves on what I do believe is the Dead Coast. So things are actually going to kick off really quickly, so I do want to go over the comp and what I was thinking first and foremost before we start things off. For my Lord I did pick, and actually so the build idea I had here was to essentially copy or emulate the compositions I run against Dark Elves when I'm playing as Brettonia. Almost to the letter. Going with a cheap front line, going very cavalry heavy, because Vampire Counts do have decent sort of mid-tier cavalry, or no, not mid, well, both mid-tier and top-tier cavalry, but in this case I'm actually using the top-tier cavalry. But figuring, I can go heavy, light on the infantry, heavy on the cavalry, and that could potentially work if my opponent, especially if he goes shooting heavy, if he doesn't bring too much blackguard, I could be in a decent spot. So that is what I was thinking with this build. And so for my Lord, I actually brought Manfred, who's essentially my Fey Enchantress substitute. Now the problem with Manfred compared to the Fey is that he doesn't have, well, quite the healing power. He doesn't, but he does have a lot of Winds of Magic between Master of Black Arts and sort of Unholy Power. He also doesn't have the free nuke with the Chalice of Potions, but I figured if my opponent blobs, I'll have a Purple Sun, I've got Fate of Buna, I've got Spirit Leech, I've got Invocation of the Heck, Raised Dead, and Van Hell's Dance Macabre, so I basically got a spell for every situation. He's still fairly cheap in this sort of format, and he's a decent combat lord, even though he doesn't have the Mist, so I figured, he'll be okay. Then for my front line here, it's very cheap, so just a few Skeleton Spears, Skeleton Warriors, Graveguard, and Königstein Stalkers, anchoring things in the middle. The Poor Man's Graveguard, normal Graveguard. These guys won't do well against most Dark Elf infantry, but they can hold, they'll do okay for a while. And really the main strike force is on the periphery, so we've got 2 bats in the air to provide a suppression for enemy skirmishers. Then we've got 3 Blood Knights, as you can see, and then the Black Coach, which is a little bit of a meme. I know people kind of think it's a laughing stock, but honestly, if it gets its buffs going, and if you manage to keep microing it really well, it can do a lot of damage. It's got a bonus for its infantry of 20, it's got great charge bonus, it's got AP, magic damage, it's pretty strong in its own right, so I figured, we can perhaps make it work, get some use out of that terror, which I otherwise lack in this army. And then all the way out here on the flank, where things will kick off almost immediately, are my Dire Pack. So these guys are, of course, Regiment of Renowned Dire Wolves, bonus versus large of 14. They're pretty good. I think they're one of the units that is basically good in every matchup. As you can see, they will immediately kick off with an assault against the Slaanesha's Harvesters, and this is actually going to go surprisingly well. My opponent doesn't get the charge off because he wasn't quite on top point, and so he's actually going to take quite a bit of a beating. You can see immediately those Dire Pack doing a lot of damage here. 7 models knocked off these guys in seconds. Dire Wolves, of course, did get a buff to their HP in the last patch, so that makes them a little more competitive. I accidentally missed micro there, almost pull them away. The last second I do keep them in. You can see the Slaanesha's Harvesters having a really bad time. Now for my opponent, he'd go with a super elite infantry build, and this is why I was immediately regretting not bringing Graveguard with Graveguns. Normally when I do Brettonia, I actually do bring an anti-infantry unit. I do bring a few Foot Squires, and I didn't do that here. So I've got no source of sort of heavy anti-infantry. In retrospect, what I should have been doing, I should definitely have been bringing some sort of anti-heavy infantry, something to deal with Blackguard, and I did not. So this is sort of, you live and learn. But for my opponent's build, very elite. He did bring Hellbroken, who is still, I think, ridiculously powerful. She is mounted here on her Cauldron of Blood. She does have, of course, her Cursed Blade. She's got her Murder Party, Amulet of Dark Fire, which gives her a monstrous magic resist of 47%. Really annoying when you're playing as Vampire Counts and kind of rely on magic a good bit. Witch Brew, of course, Gaze of Cain, so that's the Murder Party, Fury of Cain, which is a separate cast, so a lot of abilities. Really strong. She's very expensive though. It's about a quarter of my opponent's army cost wrapped up in one character. For the rest of his army, Hellbroni, Blackguard, Blades of the Blood Queen, and some Bleak Swords, so pretty elite, but definitely fleshed out with some cheap chaff. And then a Sorcerer of Fire coming in with Kindle Flame, Darkstar Cloak, Flaming Sword Ruin, and the Burning Head, and Flamestorm, so quite a bit of stuff there. Over here my opponent is actually forced to use his Soul Stealer and Word of Pain on the Dire Pack, which shows these guys, despite the fact that they're trash tier unit. These guys are 650, I think 1200 or 1300 on Slaanesha's Harvesters, and despite that, we were almost able to beat these guys down. That's pretty crazy. Had my opponent not stooped to using his spells, and that means he's wasted a charge of his Word of Pain here. It means he's used up his only Soul Stealer. If my opponent hadn't done that, these Dire Wolves could have quite possibly beaten down the Slaanesha's Harvesters. That actually shows just how well they do against the sort of squishy low-end cav. Now for the rest of my opponent's build, he does have, over here you can see the Raven Heralds, who have been caught by bats and are getting wrecked. With their high melee defense against the low melee attack of the Raven Heralds, the bats in a long run sort of atrocious fight are going to win out, and my opponent is definitely, this is a bit of an investment here. It's like 1,000 gold or something wrapped up in that unit, and they're getting dumpstered. So honestly, the match has kicked off to a very strong start for me, and I was definitely very pleased with myself as this match sort of started off. My opponent does mop up my dire pack here. The Slasher Harvesters do win out, but they've lost about half their strength and about a third of their models. Now in the front line, though, things are not going to go as pretty. You can see the Skeleton Warriors immediately getting dumpstered by the blades. Here in the front line, Manfred does dive in, and he's gunning very hard for the Sorcerer of Fire, and I do try to sort of cycle charge with the Blood Knights, but my opponent has no back line for me to really target, which is a bit of a problem. Really, in retrospect, had I had sort of those great weapons, I could have dealt with these Blackguard more efficiently, and then you had the Blood Knights poking away at the weaker units, but as it is, I don't have much to poke at, and the Blackguard are doing a good job holding. Now, my opponent here gets a nice little burning head. It's going to roast a few skeletons. It's not going to do much to the graveyard, so I wasn't too concerned. You can see the Black Host here getting a bit snagged, getting kind of messed up by these Bleak Swords and the Blackguard, and really not good stuff for me. So in the meantime, I do pull some bats back. You can see the Raven Heralds here being pursued off the map in a very pathetic manner on their on 14 models still. So they've actually only lost 4 models, but getting wrecked. And for my opponent, you know, he's pulling his Slaanesh Harvesters around the flank here. They are trying to sneak around, but it's kind of right now it's kind of an iffy situation. It's definitely on the cusp here. You can see my opponent is using the Murder Party here to make these guys crazy, but I do drop Fate of Bune on the Blades of the Blood Queen. Despite the magic resist coming in from Helbron, they're still going to take a monstrous amount of damage. They're going to get melted very badly. In retrospect, what I should have done is cast it on the Blackguard. These guys are not as much of a threat to Blood Knights as the Blackguard is, but unfortunately I wasn't thinking all that clearly at the time, and I paid the price. In the meantime, though, these Blood Knights are going to crush into the Helbronai as well as the Sorcerer of Fire and completely wrap up these poor fools. In the meantime, over here, the Blood Knights do actually crash into the Slander's Harvesters, who are very lightly armored, and even with their 40% physical resist, they are not going to endure well at all. Blood Knights are just really, really strong. I think they're actually a lot better than they used to be. You can see an invocation of the Heck going down, so this front line's holding. You can see the Bleak Swords are not doing too hot, but unfortunately with the Murder Party and all those buffs, and Crone Helbron providing that constant drain on HP, I'm in a very, very bad spot. You can see Black Coach here worming its way out. It has procced all 3, I think, of its buffs. Only 2, I think. You can see here I'm trying to sort of desperately throw the bats in, trying to slow some units down. The Black Coach here zooming away. Top speed has finally got Black Nimbus, so very mobile. But my opponent here does have a very healthy Crone Helbron, so I was very, very worried. And you can see over here, Raven Herald's getting mopped up, but things were looking pretty grim. I'm able to route these guys off, but unfortunately the thing is the Blackguard, they've got immunity psychology, so they don't care if Blackguard just doesn't care if you've got Fear and Terror on the field. They don't route. And this is why, in retrospect, like I said, I was really regretting not bringing a unit that could that had great weapons. But you can see here the Blades of the Blood Queen, especially now that the graveyard weapons are cheaper. But nonetheless, you can see the Blades of the Blood Queen here getting dumpstered and kind of falling apart. And I do get a nice little invocation of the Heck there, healing these guys up, trying to get some HP back. And you can see things are looking okay. It's not going good, but between all these summons from Manfred, I'm kind of able to separate my opponent's forces, divide them up, divide and conquer, and we're doing okay. Unfortunately for me, though, my opponent does cast the Murder Party, but perhaps actually a stroke of sort of luck for me. At this point, most of my units are basically gone. So 2 summon units of zombies and some bats holding the line here. So my opponent's essentially wasted his Murder Party to mop up a bunch of useless units while my Blood Knights disengage and are not forced to re-engage. So you can see we're going to get a little bit of a meaty charge here. Manfred's going to get a little greedy. And we're going to do a little bit of damage here. You can see the Bleak Swords here taking quite a beating from the flank charge, but Helbron is going to have none of it. She's going to push in pretty quickly, and although we could have potentially stayed in there, I really didn't want to risk it, so I'm going to pull away. And things are actually looking pretty bleak right now. Now, granted, the balance of power isn't my favorite, and I'm not entirely sure why that is, perhaps because of all these Blood Knights. My opponent still has 2 reasonably healthy Blackguards that are not going to rout, and an almost full HP Crone Helbron. That is a potentially disaster for me. Now, granted, I'm going to get my bats back here, but at this point, my opponent is in a pretty strong spot. You can see here he actually managed to intercept my Blood Knights, and because the blade essentially works the same way it used to, it's still a ridiculous debuff that does a ridiculous bit of damage, and it actually means that Crone Helbron here is going to do quite a bit of damage to these poor Blood Knights. And although I do manage to mop these Bleak Swords, I'm just taking a constant beating on my poor Knights, and her blade is still ridiculously strong, even though it only does like 100 damage for every hit. Basically, if you're roaming around with Helbron, you're still going to be doing ludicrous amounts of damage. So you can see here I'm disengaging, desperately pulling away with my Blood Knights. The bats soaring over there, a vast flock flapping over this mountain here, and I basically just retreat from my opponent. You can see the balance of power shifting in his favor. At this point, it's about dead even, and really, I didn't feel the balance of power was dead even at all. I felt that this was the end game for me, because you can see the Blackguard here, 2300 HP, 3000, so these guys are a little under health. Bleak Swords, they're not too relevant, but you can see Chrono Hellbraun here getting a little greedy. My opponent trying to pursue, very desperately, sort of trying to get into contact, and I don't have to give him a fight until I choose the timing. So what I do here, I actually turn around and charge in with the Blood Knights, and right as I do so, I have Manfred use some of my last reserves of Winds of Magic to summon up some zombies. You can see they're going to block up these Blackguard. Of course, do not have the mass to get in. Block up the Bleak Swords. The bats come in. They're going to swoop in on these Blackguard, and they're going to tie them down. The point isn't that they're going to win. They don't stand a chance of winning, but they're going to be able to tie them down. And my opponent actually just used Witch Brew, so in a huge error, he's going to Rampage, and he's stuck in. Now, granted, he's going to beat down these Blood Knights pretty good. He's going to do some good damage. Chrono Hellbraun, even with all these disadvantages, even with the fact that she's not dedicated anti-large, she hits like a truck. She's going to be mauling my poor Blood Knights here. But you know what? With Manfred and the gang here, they are able to pick her apart. You can see she finally does start falling. Even her physical resist can't save her at this point, and 37 HP, and then she finally just collapses, and you can see the shattered remains there. And this is where things swing decisively in my favor. Now you can see, granted, these still two units of Blackguard alive. One of my units of Blood Knights is practically gone. Honestly, two basically are, and one is not that healthy. But as you can see, we are able to surround my opponent. The Bleak Swords here are routing. I actually throw my near-dead Blood Knights in just to get some more damage out of him. And in comes Manfred and the squad. And we've kind of managed to divide these two Blackguard units because one was trying to flank around and get to help Hellbraun. So they're isolated, and we get a nice little charge there. Manfred is plowing through them. And at this point, I was playing to cycle charge some more. My opponent's army actually shatters to army losses. So a Pyrrhic victory for the Vampire Counts. And I would say a very close one, and arguably we came right down to the wire. Great game to Sheev Campy here. Right now, it was a crazy match. I was actually certain I was going to lose right up until the end game. A few things I learned. If I were to execute this build again, I probably wouldn't bother with Black Coach. I'd probably cut some corners somewhere, make room to get two Graveyard Great Weapons in there, just to provide some support against Blackguard, because they are a pretty common sight against Vampire Counts. They've got anti-large, they've got immunity psychology, which is an instant double whammy of strength. They've got great armor, they've got good AP values. They're strong, so against them I think it would be good to bring a unit of or two of Graveyard Great Weapons. Not say Cairn Wraiths. The reason I wouldn't bring Cairn Wraiths is because, say, Lure of Fire, your opponent drops a Flaming Sword of Ruin on his troops, you're goners. You've lost your entire front line there. So that's something I like to avoid. Now, for the rest of the build, yeah, the Blood Knights are pretty cool. It's a little iffy. The thing is, you don't have the Mortis Engine effect with Manfred. And the heals aren't that strong. And you don't have the nuke, so it's a little iffy. It's not quite the same. It's not quite comparable. But I do think it might be possible to pull off. I might have to experiment with other lords in this setup as well. Perhaps the Red Duke could be better. Because even though he doesn't have the same Winds of Magic capacity, he does have Elsif, which can be good against if you need to snipe out lords and heroes. The bats, I think, are solid. I think the Blood Knights are solid. I think I think the Black Coach and the Infantry Corps needs to be tossed up. Just throw Terror out the window, because realistically, against most of the Dark Elf units, they've either got too much leadership or they're immune to psychology. Most of these units are not going to rout the Terror, whether or not they're immune to psychology or not. And so it's just not really worth it, in my opinion, to bother with the Black Coach. But otherwise, I'd say this combat contingent is reasonable. I just need to sort of think through the infantry core and how I'm going to revise it. Probably get some Grave Weapons in there. If I cut the Black Coach and I cut the Graveguard and switch them out and turn them into Graveguard Grave Weapons, that's about the equivalent pricing there. I might have a few more points left over. I might be able to buy an extra unit of Skeleton Swords or something like that. But that would basically be a decent sort of setup. So yeah. Regardless, I do think it's potentially viable. I still got to do more testing, but I did think it was pretty fun to just try this out, try a Brettonia-esque build for the Vampire Counts. So I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below if you haven't already. As usual, guys, if you have any comments, any criticisms, anything you'd like to share, be sure to post it down in the comments. I do read it, I do look at it, and I'll respond as soon as I'm able. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.